Hey guys, Solomon here. Hope you are having a great day. I mean, here's the deal, right? This is the last video that I'm going to be posting for Hippo Week. I mean, I've been going daily this last week with Hippo content. And yeah, I mean, I really hope that you guys have enjoyed it. Big shout out to you guys that have been following the Hippo content on this channel up to this point. And this is not me saying that this is necessarily the last video that I'm ever going to do on the Hippo. I mean, I'm pretty addicted to it in all honesty, so you probably will see some Hippo content here and there, but in a lot of ways, this is kind of the last hurrah, right? Up to this point, I've made 35 videos on the Hippo, and I have a 6-hour course, around 6 hours, really walking you through the hippopotamus defense beginning to end, right? Ideas, strategies, games, theory, things you need to memorize, things you don't, all that kind of stuff. And, for those of you that have purchased the course already, I hope that you enjoyed it. And for those of you that haven't, I put a lot of work into it, and I hope that you guys get a lot of good stuff out of that one. But yeah, I mean, to finish out this week, I didn't want to go over a Grandmaster game. I didn't want to go over one of my games. I wanted to cover your guys' games, right? So I sent out a community poll asking for, some of you guys to send in your personal online games online, over the board, all that kind of stuff. And, unfortunately, I couldn't get to everybody, but we are going to be covering 5 games sent in from subscribers, starting out with Nick Luciano, one of my private students, as well as one of my Patreon supporters. And let's just jump into it. So here he's playing as black, white here starts out with D4, and from black we see the usual 1, 2, and 3, right? In my course, I talk about how this is really the move order that I prefer, prioritizing kingside development, kind of starting out with a modern and then playing D6. But of course, there's a lot of different ways that you can get into the Hippo. So if you don't like this one, there's always different kind of ways that you can try things out. And in my course, on top of that, I talk about some of the issues that you could face if you start out with a different move order, but how you're going to be completely fine in a lot of ways if you know what you're doing. So, okay, all that being said, here Nick as black played against the move of bishop f4. We have b6, and by the way, guys, in this video, I'm really going to be giving an analysis of these games, right? The good moves, the bad ones, and really trying to help both the individual player that sent these games in, as well as you guys, because, if you see these mistakes in these games, you might be making them as well, and you may see some ideas here that you haven't really thought of that are really great. Right. So I think that, there's some value in not just covering the best, greatest games of all times, but also kind of covering club level games, right? Seeing the good and also seeing what you need to avoid, right? This move of B6, it's not a huge mistake or anything like that. Overall, though, I personally, kind of avoid the move of B6 before I have both of my E and D6 pawns ready to go, right? The reason for this is because the moment I play B6, there are times where white can play this move D5. And it turns out in this position, black is completely fine. But in a lot of ways, we kind of do got to abandon our usual Hippo setup, right? And, okay, I mean, here's the idea, right? If we play bishop B7, we're never going to be able to play E6 or E5 without getting captured, right? E5 is simply going to run into an en passant, right? And if we play a move like E5 now, en passant can still happen. We're going to have to take with the pawn or take back with the bishop. And taking back with the bishop is absolutely fantastic if our pawn is not on B6, right? But because our pawn is on B6, I mean, now we've kind of just unnecessarily weakened our light squares a little bit, right? So going back, to bishop f4, I usually, in a position like this, I may play a6, looking to play b5, I may play e6, but I don't play b6 until I have both of my central pawns there, but that's just how I play it. You can try it on your own games and see how you do with that idea. But okay, b6 here, white here doesn't try to push, with d5 trying to take control of those light squares. We see the move queen d2, h6, nice move here from Nick. And okay, I mean, fianchetto, e6, knight e7, this is all good. Bishop e5, knight d7, perfect. If you get checked, if you get your queen attacked with some kind of move like bishop g5, just play normal, right? There's no reason to freak out. Play knight e7 if you see that. Of course, if there's not a pawn on h6. If there's a pawn on h6, just take the bishop. But okay, in this case, Nick doesn't freak out here. He doesn't play knight c6, which can run into d5 ideas. He doesn't play c6 or bishop c6 or runs away with the king. He just plays normal chess. And really what he gets is a tempo, right? We're going to play a6 anyways. Now we're getting it with tempo. We were going to play knight d7 anyways. Cool. We played it. In this case, white plays the move bishop c4, giving us another tempo, right? White here, moving this bishop 1, 2, now 3 times. This is only giving black the edge, right? We see this move of knight b6, h4, and now knight c6. Okay, now this is something I talk a little bit about in my course. I haven't touched a lot on it, you know, in my videos up to this point, but this is a nice idea, right? Because, you know, really when we play b5 and knight b6, we want to play d5 in a lot of cases, right? I mean, this knight b6 move really does help d5 happen, right? I mean, if we push with d5, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces supporting that move. But in this case, I really do like knight c6, right? Because, you know, at this point in the game, if we do play d5, white's not forced to take back, right? They have a lot of support for that pawn on e4. And really this move of knight c6, it's looking to come to a5 as one of its, you know, possible destinations. It was putting some pressure on d4. It was looking at knight b4, potentially trapping the bishop. And we now see this move of knight a5, right? Both of these knights attacking the square of c4. By the way, the squares of c4 and f4 are very key in the Hippo. Very key squares, right? They're really where we want to get our knights. Our g8 knight wants to get to f4. Our b8 knight wants to get to c4, right? And we're going to do it like so. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right. Now, of course, in this situation, we went 1, 2, 3, and we have 2 knights looking at that square. And now we have d captures on e6. I think Nick here probably should have just captured back with the f pawn, right? Take back with that pawn, just take back, and then continue from here. I mean, you know, in chess, if you've studied endgames or even, you know, opening middle game type positions, a 3-on-3, white could do some things to break the game open, but a 2-on-2, there's just not much white can do to break the game open, right? You push here, okay. You push there, all right, we'll play h5, right? I mean, either way, we're fine. So yeah, I mean, here black has a very chill position, clamping down on e5 as well. Now we're looking to throw a knight into c4, and we're just playing chess, right? But going back to d takes e6, we see knight a c4 right away, which is a little bit rushed if white plays it correctly. White takes on f7 with check, which is good. Queen e1. And then here after b4, I mean, honestly, at this point, if white plays the move of knight a4, they're actually going to be okay. Right? The whole idea there is that knight a4, it seems like it hangs a knight, but then they just win this knight with check, right? And knight a4, if we try to sack the knight or something, then knight captures back, right? So knight a4 really does hold on to things here, looks to trade down, and white's up a point in material. They're up a pawn, so they're going to want to trade down. On top of that, they're being attacked. But in this position, white makes a tiny little slip up. This is something that you see all the time, and that is really this idea of the bishops coming alive, right? Anytime white overpushes, anytime white kind of neglects the fact that we have 2 fianchetto bishops, one of them can fly in, checking the king. We now have bishop takes on d5, queen f6, white attacks the queen, and Nick finishes this thing off with a beautiful checkmate, knight a3, right? Game over here. And white had to throw in the towel. So, you know, kind of going back through that game, you know, mentally speaking, I would say the one thing that I would probably switch is getting both of my central pawns in the center and then committing to a fianchetto, which we did talk about, you know, a little bit in our private lesson, just, you know, kind of how to start the game off. But yeah, that's one thing I would change. And then I'd also say, you know, in that kind of position where white captured the pawn, just take back, right? In that kind of situation, we're in no rush. It's not like if we take back, white's going to checkmate us or anything. Play the calm move and then go from there to play attacking game, right? Play that attacking game. So, okay, our next game is played by my guy, Pat. He sent in a very impressive game with some very nice and fun attacking chess, so I thought I'd share it. And, okay, we have e4 as usual, 1, 2, and 3, right? Bishop c4, e6. Love this move. Big fan of it. The moment that you see bishop c4, lock the bishop down, right? Bishop e3 is played, knight t7, knight e7, queen d2, h6, right? We don't want to let this bishop into h6, so let's stop it. Playing h6 ourselves. And yeah, I mean, now white, I guess they could still go there, but then we have a rook and a bishop attacking that square, so we just win a piece for a pawn. And here white castles queenside, right? So b6 is played here. I do think that a6 is also a possibility, right? Looking to play b5, potentially, just getting a little bit more space with that pawn, gaining some tempo. But okay, we have the move of b6. White plays e5 here, d5, and bishop e5. You know, and this is the thing. I mean, white playing e5 there was a little bit premature. You know, it kind of allowed us to lock the position up. But this is what you see a lot of times in the Hippo. If you start the game out strongly and white has a 2-pawn center, they're kind of just going to be sitting there wondering, what do I do now, right? I mean, if I throw down a pawn like that, g5 is played, right? If I throw a pawn down here, potentially we have a6 and b5 attacking the bishop, gaining space, right? So it's hard for white to do anything besides push these pawns, you know, and especially in, you know, online chess or in a quicker time control. And okay, here we have the move e5, and in the Hippo, we want to lock things down, right? Because notice here, if we compare our pieces, specifically our knights, both of these knights are kind of neutralized, right? I mean, I'm not really seeing a great outpost for either of these guys at the moment. Of course, they're both attacking the center, but who cares? One of them's attacking their own pawns. The other one's attacking, d5 and e4, which is going to be defended for a long, long time. Our knights, on the other hand, have some potential, right? As I mentioned earlier in the video, we want to get our knights to f4 and c4. I would say at this point in the game, we want to look at getting a knight to c4 more than f4, right? Because, and this is kind of the way I put it, right? Whenever there's some kind of lock in the center, there is a side that the bishops can see, and there's a side that the bishops cannot see as well, right? They can't see the queen side as well in this particular case, so we're going to want to advance on the queen side and look to activate this knight, maybe support a c5 push, and yeah, just start, adding pressure on that side. We have a6, which is great. Again, white here, they move the bishop, they move it a second time. Here they move it a third time. Bishop e7 is played, good move, g4. White here trying to expand. I'm not that worried about it. Again, right? I mean, we're going to have a 2-on-2 if white keeps pushing, and a 2-on-2 is very easy to just kind of lock down, right? And in the game here from Pat, we have knight c6. I do think that this was an inaccuracy. I really instead like the move of c5, right? And in a lot of ways, this looks like a French defense, just this structure right here, right? A French defense, you have e4, e6, white expands in the center, we play d5, and white pushes again, right? In that case, what the French player usually wants to do is play c5, and that's what I recommend here, right? Of course, I don't really play c5 in the Hippo usually if I'm not fully developed, but in this case, we got both of our bishops fianchettoed, both of our knights in the center, 6 pawns on the 6th rank, before we play d5, and okay, c5, breaking through here, right? Putting pressure on white. If white plays queen e2 or knight e2, c4 traps the light squared bishop, right? If white sits there, we have moves like rook c8, right? Moves like knight c6, both of which gaining attacking pressure. And if white captures on c5, in this case, I kind of like taking back with the pawn. In my course, we kind of go through different positions reached by GMs, in which some cases taking with the pawn was good, in some cases taking with the knight was advantageous. I would say in this case, taking with a pawn is really nice because white has 4 pieces on the 3rd rank, all right next to each other. And we have a lot of different moves that are possible, including d4, right? Giving us a little central fork, right? Looking at c4 as well, attacking the bishop. Of course, you do got to play a little bit of attention to c4, pay a little bit of attention to it, just because if we do play c4, d4 becomes a little bit weak. But all that being said, I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing white can do to get rid of those pawns or make them do anything. We're just going to keep them there until we find the right time to push, right? But okay, going back to g4, we have the move of knight c6, which again, I think c5 just really adds a whole different element to black's attacking chances. But okay, we have a3, queen e7, h4, and now castling queenside. I would probably wait on this move a little bit. Black plays castling queenside and then b5. I would say that the king is completely safe here. Completely safe, right? And on top of that, this rook could become an attacking piece, and it defends the pawn of a6, right? So I'm not saying to rule out castling queenside. In fact, castling kingside is probably not going to happen in this game, and Pat didn't castle kingside, and that's a great thing because, again, all of white's, both of their bishops and their queen can see very well this side of the board. This side, not so much, right? Because of that pawn on d4. So if I did have to castle, I would castle queenside, but I think for now, our king is extremely safe. I mean, I don't see anything getting near it at all at any point in the near future. But okay, we have castling queenside, and again, by castling this early, white, they start to put a little bit of pressure on an a6 pawn, and, here we have a4, things get a little bit messy, but black, really continues here to play a great game with queen b4, right? Love this square for the queen. Just getting it to the queen side of the board. White takes the bishop, we take back with the king, knight a2, the queen simply drops back. The rook lifts, and we now bring our rook to a8 and to b8, right? Get our king out of the way. And now, as you see, I mean, there's just, both of these rooks, right? Both of these guys, there's just a lot of pressure going on both of these files. And here's the thing. This is something that I've recommended before on the channel. This is something that I've recommended to my private students, by the way, if you're interested, meeting up with me one-on-one and talking through some of your games and really, me just trying to coach you through how to become a better player. I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well. But this is something that I recommend, right? This is a little tip that I have for you guys, and that is cut the board in half, right? Cut the board in half and count how many pieces, not including kings, are on both sides of the board, right? Here, white has 1, 2 defenders. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 attacking pieces on that side of the board. Now, you could sit there and go, okay, well, the knight's not an attacking piece. Sure, the knight on d7 is not doing a ton, but it is on that side of the board. At the same time, you do got to look at the other side of the board as well, right? Chess is made of 64 squares, not 32. So we do have to pay attention to all the pieces over here. But just notice, right? I mean, if we cut the board over here, white is totally outnumbering us, right? I mean, 4-1, but who cares? It's completely locked up. And, I mean, what are they going to do? Attack our bishop, right? So, yeah, king c8, b3 is played, and black kind of sits here and goes, you know what? I mean, I have a lot of attacking pieces, a lot of firepower. Why not get some more in there? Bishop f8. Love this idea. White spends all this time pushing their pawns like crazy, trying to lock our bishop down. Okay, we'll move it, right? Queen d3 is played. We have queen a5 now. And yeah, I mean, at first I was kind of looking at this move like, didn't black just hang a knight? But here's the idea. We take on b3. I mean, the queen, if you capture back, we have multiple moves there, including taking the queen or even playing queen takes a2, right? Because this queen is pinned to the king on b1. And yeah, I mean, if this knight moves anywhere, we're just going to drop a queen on a1. I mean, black. I mean, at the end of the day, white's position is just getting blasted open, right? So white takes here, and now Pat continues by taking off that knight. Rook takes b3, knight d2 is played, and here white just resigns the game, right? Because, you know, they probably realize that they just hung a queen, and why would you want to play chess if you're down 10 points of material? All that being said, though, I did want to mention this is just completely lost for white. Right, it's just lost. You know, I mean, we got 3 major pieces right around the king. We're attacking the queen. We have rook b1 ideas in the air if the queen does leave the defense of that square. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of things that can happen here. I mean, even if white plays something like queen c2, this may seem like white's saving grace, but there are a lot of ways to play here. I mean, we can play bishop check, queen check. You know, there's a lot of different moves here that are good. But I would say that this move of rook b1 with check is just great, right? Check with the rook. And yeah, I mean, if the queen takes, we have bishop a3 with check. Notice if the queen blocks, thanks for the queen. And if the king runs, thanks for the queen. Black's winning this, right? So great game by Pat there. Just thought I'd highlight that. I would say, you know, the one mistake I think that I saw was at that point of g4. Right, before you play knight c6, get that pawn to c5, right? This just adds a whole different element to the attacking game. And if white takes, we just take back. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of advantage here. One thing I didn't mention is that if you look at the central pawns, meaning the E and D, white only has 1, we have 2, right? And this pawn on e5 is very vulnerable to attack. So yeah, great game by Pat there. Next up, we got a game from my guy, Elephant Heart. You know, if you guys have been looking closely at the comments, Elephant Heart has probably commented on almost every Hippo video, if not every single one. I mean, he's been very present in the comment section and just talking through the system. So yeah, he's been a great person to kind of bounce ideas off of. But yeah, here he's playing as black, going up in a daily game against a national master in online chess. White starts out with knight f3, and from black we have g6, d6, and bishop g7. A little bit of a different move order than what I play, but same position, right? Knight c3, e6, this is great. Knight e7, b6, very clean. Castling, bishop e7. I mean, this is just great Hippo chess here. Rook f e1, and here he doesn't play a6, and I think that's a good thing, right? I talk about this in my course as well. Usually I play h6 and a6, but here's the thing: if there's a pawn on c4 or on a4, I usually don't play a6, right, most of the time, because of the fact that b5 is just not an option, right? I mean, one of the biggest purposes of playing h6 is to prepare g5 and knight g6, right, or that idea, right? Same with a6, right? I guess one thing that a6 does do is it helps prepare c5, you know, because if you're not careful and you play something like c5, there's moments where knight b5 can be played, and it's very annoying attacking your pawn on d6. So that's one thing that a6 does. If you are wanting to play c5, you might want to play a6 first. But if you're not looking at this move of c5 honestly, what I would say is just keep this pawn here, because you don't want to play a6, face a4, and then have to prevent a5 with playing a5 yourself, right? Just keep the pawn here, and then if they play a4, you can play a5. Notice how you only used one move instead of two, right? And okay, I mean, there's a lot of different, there's a few different moves that black can go with here. King f8 is actually played, which is a solid move. I mean, plug it into Stockfish, it does like King f8. I would say that f5 is a pretty good option to kind of think about if you go up against a 3-pawn center from e4 to c4, right? I had a game, this last year against a FIDE master in a tournament setting, and I actually got a really good position, against a 3-pawn center, a position somewhat similar to this with playing f5, right? Kind of attacking the outer rim of this pawn chain, right? Because oftentimes that pawn on e4 is a little bit neglected, and I got a good position. Of course, I fumbled it, but yeah, I mean, it's a great thing to play. If you go up against a f4, e4, and d4 3-pawn center, playing b6, d6, and c5, putting pressure on the outer rim of that pawn chain in the center is also a great idea. And yeah, so those are just a couple things to think about. But here we have the move of king f8, right? Why is this such a good move? Well, we're slow castling, right? We're trying to get our king slowly to a more stable, tucked-in, castled position. And if we castle kingside, how we usually would, well, we're just going to lose our pawn on h6, right? So our rook does have to keep an eye on this pawn. So, okay, we'll play king f8. It may seem very slow, and in a way it is, but at the same time, we're playing the hippo. If you try to break through too hard, we'll close it up, and our knights and our pieces are going to have more activity in range than yours, right? So here we have the move of b4, and now the move of a4. And I would say at this point, black plays king h7. I do think at this point, black needs to try to do something, just because white has 5 pawns on the 4th rank. I mean, there's a lot going on here, right? White has a lot of space. I would probably look at this move of knight c6 as an option, right? Knight c6. If you play something like b5, we have the square of a5 available as a possible destination. We could also play this move of a5, right? I'm a big fan, again, if you see a4, playing a5, right? In a 3-pawn center from e4 to c4 like this, putting pressure on that guy. And yeah, just seeing what white does. I mean, if they want to take on a5, we'll take back with the rook, right? If they want to push with a move like b5, right? Now we can start to look at moves like king h7, f5, all that kind of stuff. But I would say, just offering a little bit of a resistance might be good in the future, for Elephant Heart, if you're watching this video, in a position like that, right? So, I mean, up to this point, perfect hippo chess, great game. I would just say maybe at this point, offer a little bit of resistance with the move a5. Something to keep in mind is that, 6 of our pawns from G to B, anytime one of them moves, they're weakening 2 squares, right? But our A and our H pawns, anytime they move, they're only weakening 1, right? So they're just a lot more free to roam and kind of do stuff on the edges of the board, right? They're not responsible for as much. So it's very easy to just push a move like a5, especially when you see a4. But okay, we have the move king h7, and now a5 is played from white, right? And that's kind of why I wanted to play this move, is because I feel like now white's a little bit in the driver's seat from a practical standpoint. We can't really get rid of the pawn. White's looking to take, they're looking to play a6, right? We play the move a6 here, but white plays rook a b1, rook f8, and this is just annoying, right? It's just annoying. And yeah, I mean, if we ever take, white takes back, the rook's very active, and white just has a great space advantage. So, okay, bishop d3 is played. We have f5. Yeah, solid idea here. Very solid move. Queen c2, and more great chess from Elephant Heart, right? He's going up against a national master in daily chess, and he plays f4 and e5. And now after d takes e5, I think that we missed a key opportunity in this game, and that's because my guy Elephant Heart took with the pawn. But I would ask the question, would I rather have a pawn here or a knight/bishop? I think a knight or a bishop, right? I mean, there's a lot of cases in the hippo where we get some kind of triangle action, right? All the pawns looking up to f4. We already have a pawn on f4, and we get the potential option of getting that e5 square. I would say in this case, I would much rather have a knight on this very strong square than a pawn, right? And even if white takes back, right, with all that pressure we're putting on f3, take with the bishop, right? Your bishop is now a lot more active, right? We have potential f3 ideas in the game, right? Breaking open the king side. And just overall, I mean, look at our minor piece here, right? It can't really get touched at the moment. We have some very active chess on the way, okay? But okay, going back again, d takes e5. Now we take back with the pawn. I just feel like we're kind of missing out on some activity that we could have gotten, right? But okay, we take back with the pawn, bishop f1, g5, g4, very aggressive chess here. I would also say g4. It's not a blunder or anything, but I would probably say, you know, maybe knight c6 here before you play g4, just to eye, you know, this h4 square, because when we play g4 right away, of course, by the way, if you do play knight c6, you know, white could play h3 and try to slow it down. All that being said, if we play g4 right now, the knight kind of just comes to h4 and is now looking at f5, which is a little bit annoying, right? So in this case, we take that knight off. We have f3 continuing to expand h5 and rook f7, right? Getting that rook to the 7th rank and defending the knight on t7. b5 is now played, now h4, both sides kind of just rushing up the board and trying to attack each other. Bishop a3, we take the pawn, and yeah, after f takes, even before taking on g3, I think that taking on b5 would be probably the best move there. But I think in this situation, you definitely got to take on b5, right? Because here's the idea. If you take back with the pawn, we say thanks for the bishop, right? If, you know, you want to take back with the pawn or with the knight in that kind of situation, we're still going to take the pawn on a5, and we're playing an active game, right? We just got up a pawn, immaterial. We're then going to put some pressure on a3, and we're trying to find some counterplay there, right? And here, if a move like rook takes b5, trying to defend that, I mean, first off, we could just take on a5, right? That's playable, but I would say here maybe bishop c6, and if the rook drops away, which is a very human move, the computer actually recommends this move of queen e8, right? Very interesting option. But I think here's the point, right? If white wants to take here, then okay, we'll win the bishop, right? So this pawn's kind of going to stay here. And we're also getting out of the vision of the rook on d1, right? We don't want one of our pieces pinned by a rook, right? Get the queen out. And on top of that, we're supporting e5, right? Very interesting position here because black has 2 passed pawns, right? White also has a passed pawn. We have 2 passed pawns, and I mean, a lot can happen in a position like this, right? A lot can happen. So I think that's one way that black could have played here is, you know, taking on b5 and really looking at this option. But okay, king g7 is played, c5, and here we have a takes b6, and now the move of c6. I would say I'm not a fan of c6 just because it locks down potentially our best piece in the position, right? If you plug it into Stockfish, it actually recommends rook takes a3, right? Which may seem very scary against knight takes b5. It turns out here black has a great, you know, just really a fantastic idea, right? Almost immortal game type stuff. And that's with this move of f2 check, right? Now I'm not sitting here telling you that I found this variation. I did not. Okay, Stockfish did. So yeah, I'm not that good, but okay. f2 check. You know, here's the idea. If queen takes, our rook doesn't just run away, but it gains a tempo against the queen, right? And if king takes, we now have this brutal move of queen h8. Fascinating, right? Fascinating idea there. Yeah, I mean, if king g1, we can take on g3, queen h1 check, queen h2, and we're going to pick off a queen, right? And here, if a move like knight takes a3, just saying thanks for the rook, we're still going to take here. Notice now, though, that the queen is defended by a knight, right? So we can't just sack a rook and, you know, force that king back and, okay, thanks for the queen. You know, there is a knight defending the queen here. But now we can take on g3 with check. Whole idea being, I mean, if white wants to just block with the queen, which is the best move of the position, we take back on a3, and black there with about a -7 advantage, okay? Just crushing. We're up a point material, pieces flying all over the place. White is very uncoordinated and very uncomfortable there. And really, at the end of the day, we're going to have 3 minor pieces. They're only going to have 1, okay? And if you play the move king d2, which is, you know, I mean, really, if you play here or here, black's going to have a forced mate. In this particular case, we have bishop g5 with check, attacking the king, king e2, queen e3. That's a ball game, right? So going back, I mean, a takes b6, obviously this whole idea of, you know, taking on a3 and then f2 with check, very hard to find. I mean, you know, I wonder how many of the top elite GMs would find this in a classical setting. But I don't even know if many GMs would find this in Blitz, honestly. So anyways, thought it was worth mentioning. It's a fun line. But yeah, so here c6, yeah, the bishop's definitely locked down now. Bishop c1 is played, queen f8, looking to eye this pawn, bishop e3 defending it, we take it, but now, we have a battery ram against that piece. Rook b4, we take on f5, rook takes g4, check. Again, crazy position stuff, going everywhere. Anyone that tells you that the hippo is so boring and quiet, it's not, okay? It might be quiet for the first 10 moves. After that, we're trying to play, right? So rook takes. I would say here, I think that king h8 is black saving grace, right? Get that king back to the corner. It actually turns out it's really hard for white to find any kind of advantage. In fact, Stockfish has it at dead even after that, right? You can't check again because the bishop covers that square, right? G5, H4 covered. The rook's here defending key squares. The knight's defending D3. The pawn's defending here. Look at the bishop, right? You can't go here, 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 or here without just getting captured, right? Or at least that possibility. So, I think king h8 is the move there. But now we play king f7, and our king is a little bit more exposed to attacking ideas. We have knight a4, and here white takes bishop h3, and I would say around this point, black's position starts to fall apart a little bit. We have two passed pawns very close to the edge of the board, or reaching the other side, but white starts to pick it off. Rook e5, check, forcing that move. Rook h6, and that's the ball game. All that being said, great effort by Elephant Heart. I really did enjoy that game. A lot of nice ideas that he used, particularly throwing that f pawn all the way down the board to f3. I would just say, in a position like that, try to keep your bishop on b7 active, because that is the piece that's going to give you those attacking rays by that opponent's king, right? But okay, next up, we got a game by my guy Jim. Okay, Jim, long-term subscriber, and here he's playing the hippo, and let's get it going. So we have g3 from black. We have the usual 1, 2, and 3, right? e6, b6, bishop e7, d5, and I think d5 is a little bit premature for white. It allows us to play e5 and just lock the game up pretty easily. On top of that, bishop c4 was not a good move because they played g3, right? You don't want to play g3 and then just kind of leave all this space open, right? It's very weakening. It makes it very easy for us to throw a queen into h3, to throw a knight into g4. So you really don't want to commit to this unless you're planning to play this move and really kind of lock down all of those key squares, right? But okay, so we have the move of e5. White plays this, and then that, which is not great. Then they throw in a check, and then they take, right? So white here is spending a lot of moves with their bishop, and this, and also this g3 move, which really didn't do anything but weaken their position. White now castles into it, and we have h6, rook e1. Jim continues the game with knight f6, and I would say that, it's not a blunder again, but I would say that knight e7 is definitely the move that I would go with. Stick with that hippo idea, right? In the hippo, we play knight e7. And here's the idea. In this case, let's say white plays something like king g2 if they're trying to, strengthen their squares, which at the end of the day, it's really not, because we have a bishop looking straight at it. Now, we're going to play this move f5, right? And if you look at the pawn structure, just look at the pawn structure, right? White has an advanced pawn on d5 with only one pawn defending it, right? Just like earlier, in a French position, black's pawn's here, white's pawn's here. We want to play c5 and make the pawn on d4 the target. The weakest pawn in the center is the pawn furthest away from us because pawns don't move backwards, right? They're not defended. This pawn on d5, very well defended, right? We could have 40 knights and 40 bishops, which is, by the way, not even possible because there's not that many squares or that many pawns to promote. But okay, it doesn't matter, right? Because if we take with one knight, the pawn takes back. We just gave up a piece for our pawn. But this pawn here, there's no pawns defending it, right? So the first defender for white is going to be a piece, right? So here I would say f5 is the move. Just like with the French structure, how we want to play c5, I would say in this case, the pawn on c7 is really locked down. We got to play f5. This pawn is free to roam and put pressure on e4, right? We're looking to capture back on e4 at some point, really weakening the square of d5, right? If white captures on f5, there's a ton of different things that we can play there, right? Including the very simple move of queen takes f5, although I do think that the computer against this actually recommends bishop takes d5 as an option, just, really trying to chow down on that diagonal. If white takes, we have moves like castling kingside, we have moves like queen g4, really just attacking that knight. But all that being said, again, going back, I think that queen takes f5, very simple move, improves the position. You're looking to castle, you're still putting pressure on d5, right? And okay, I mean, if the pawn just stays there, we can take whenever we want, and we're really just trying to open up some attacking chances, right? So I don't think white really gains anything from us playing f5, right? We're very well defended. They're not. So all that being said, I would say knight e7 and f5 is definitely what I would play for here. We have the move knight f6, which does prevent this push a little bit. And okay, h4, c5. So yeah, this is one of the things. So in this kind of structure, again, if we're in a French structure, let's just say these squares are highlighted by the black pawns, c5 is great, attacking the weak d4 pawn. But in this case, we got to play f5, attacking the weak pawn on e4, because what does c5 do? Not much, right? And I mean, in this case, it doesn't really solve all of white's problems to en passant, but in a lot of cases it does, because notice if white en passant's here, then the pawn on d6 is going to be extremely weak, right? Just looking at a pawn strategy standpoint, okay? So, okay, we have the move of knight d2, queen h3, black here trying to play aggressively, bishop c8, bishop g4. I would say here, I mean, bishop g4 is a small inaccuracy just because white can take with a knight, and it's kind of weird. I mean, our queen and our knight are so close to the king, but this knight is kind of holding the fort down, right? f2's covered, h2's covered, g2's also covered by the king, and there's not really much we can do to keep adding pressure onto that square, so I think that white there really does need to trade down. But instead we have the move of f3, black drops the bishop back, we have g5, queen d7, and yeah, I mean, I think there black did have some ideas of taking on g2, taking on h4, getting this knight involved at some point, but we have queen d7, g4, now h5. I do think that h5 was a blunder simply due to the fact that white, instead of taking with the bishop on g5, could have captured with the pawn, right? Black there could have just took the pawn on h4, and sure, we have double isolated pawns, but we're up a pawn, right? I mean, if a pawn's there, we can take it. And if we do take there and white tries to break the game open, they're really just breaking up with the king. But okay, going back, h5 is a mistake because white could have taken back with the pawn attacking our knight. Notice here, you got to be careful in situations like this. What happens if both sides just keep kind of capturing? If we try to match white here, right? Okay, pawn for pawn, then white takes again, right? If we go, okay, well, they got my piece, but I'm going to take a pawn, right? Before I lose this guy. They can actually just take the bishop, right? And oh no, they lost their queen. Oh wait, they have a second one, right? In this case, something like bishop g5 takes. I mean, this king's not going to survive very long, right? So okay, going back, I would say in this case, h5, it does have its time and its place, but not yet, because white can simply take on g5 with tempo, and it turns out that the race on who can take more pieces first simply ends up in white's favor, right? But white misses this. We have bishop takes, pawn takes, and yeah, from this point, solid play here from Jim, right? Just kind of taking pieces off, castling queenside, getting this rook involved. And yeah, I would say, yeah, rook h7, this is all, playable moves. I do think that this is also an inaccuracy because white does have a move here. If you want, you can pause the video and try to figure out what white should play here in a position like this. But assuming that you have paused the video, if you are trying to find the move for white, it is this move of knight f5. White did not play this, but notice white is attacking one bishop, one rook, and one pawn, and we simply can't hold on to everything. We can't, right? If we move our bishop, the rook falls. If we move our rook anywhere but here, the bishop falls, right? If we defend the pawn, then okay. I mean, white has a bunch of choices there. They'd probably just, want to take off a minor piece. But okay, I mean, let's say here we play something like rook takes g4. This actually doesn't help us because of knight takes. And look, if you take with the rook, the knight defends it. And if you take the knight, thanks for the rook, right? We're just down a rook here. This is not good, right? And going back, if we play something like rook h7, this is probably the best move that we have, but white can now just take on d6 with check, knight back. They have a passed pawn. Not ideal, right? So going back, I do think that this was a little bit of an inaccuracy. White, yeah, can throw in that knight, but instead here we see the move king h2, black plays bishop g5, we check with the rook, and here white makes a mistake. King g1 is definitely the move that they got to play here, but king g3 is played, and here white resigns the game before black even plays, probably because they saw that black here had bishop h4 check, simply winning a rook. So, solid, nice game by Jim there. He really did set himself up in a great spot up to this point. I mean, this is a great position for the Hippo player. Kudos to Jim for getting here. I would just say at this point, instead of kind of just going back into classical chess, I would really look at this pawn structure and go, man, this pawn on e4 has no pawns defending it, right? Let's play a move like knight e7, play f5, and make that pawn a target, right? Make it a target. And yeah, continue to play attacking chess. I mean, from the white perspective, this is just not a comfortable position, right? So that is probably the biggest thing that I would change in that one. All right, y'all, here we go. Right, last game of Hippo week, which feels a little bit weird to say because we've covered a lot of games out of the Hippo this week. But okay, here we go. All right, so big shout out to you, brother David, for sending this game in. I think that a lot of players will find this instructional. I think it's instructional because it's played at the intermediate level, right? 1600 to 1700 level range. And here David makes some mistakes, some strategic mistakes that I think a lot of Hippo players and just players in general that are pretty solid chess can make, right? And, again, I think it's important to also not just look at the greatest games ever, but also look at what to avoid, right? Besides just blunders, right? Of course, we know not to blunder, but what strategic mistakes should we be trying to avoid as well? And on top of that, he plays some great endgame chess, pulling out a win. And, yeah, finishing this game off nicely. So, and I think that everyone will enjoy that. So, okay, here we go. David here playing as black. We have d4 and the usual 1, 2, and 3, right? Knight d7, e6, this is all great. By the way, c3, I think this is a great way to play against the Hippo because it kind of limits our queenside expansion, right? Usually in the Hippo, most of the time we see a move like knight c3, knight f3, and 2 central pawns, right? And if we see 3 central pawns on this side of the board, we look at moves like f5, right? If we see 3 pawns on this side of the board from f4 to d4, we're looking at moves like c5 going at the outer rim, right? But in this case, white only has a 2-pawn center, but almost a 2.5, right? Because c3 kind of supports d4. c5 in general is going to be hard to pull off because white kind of just doesn't care, right? This pawn's very well defended by another pawn. On top of that, if we play a move here like a6 and b5, usually if we see a4, we're like, great, we'll play b4 and kick that knight. Oh, wait, it's not a knight. It's a pawn, right? So in this case, if we play, this queenside expansion here going to b5, white plays a4, and our pawn's kind of just a sitting duck, right? So we see the move of b6 here from David. Great choice there, not advancing too far. The bishop develops. Bishop b7, knight e7. This is all great. And a6, yep, perfect. g5. I think that this move is solid. G5 is good. I would say at this point though, knight g6 is a little bit of an error. Now, 90% of the time in my games, I play g5, knight g6 immediately. b5, knight b6 immediately. I would say in this case though, the move of e5 is a little bit daunting for a couple of reasons. First off, there's a bishop staring right at our knight. And oftentimes white can't pull this move off, right? Because, we just have so much attacking it. But notice here, white also has a lot defending it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, right? 4 pieces and a pawn, all defending it. And we can't get cute here and try to take off a defender because white just kind of replaces it with a knight on d2, right? On top of that, our knight is exposed. So I would say going back in a position like this, right? This is rare. This is rare to see a position like this where white has so much geared up for e5 and looking at a knight on g6. It's almost as if white knows what they're doing here against the Hippo. I would instead look at this move of knight f6, right? It may seem a little bit slow, but it's very solid. We're looking to play knight h5, trapping the bishop on g3, right? And okay, if we see a move like e5, we'll play knight h5. You can take if you want. But at the end of it, we'll take this bishop off, and black has a playable position here, right? And if white instead plays a move of d5, we can push with e5, right? Again, getting that kind of triangle set up in the Hippo, looking at that square of f4, and we're going to continue with our normal game plan, right? We have moves like knight h5, moves like knight g6. We have moves like bishop c8, getting this bishop active on the king side of the board. And yeah, just a fun game for black overall. So we have, again, so instead of that move of knight f6, though, looking at knight h5, we have knight g6, which at this point in the game, because of all of white's support for e5 and a helper for the knight on f3, a replacement really, this is a little bit hard to play. d5, good move. I think that this is the best move black could have played. We have queen d3. I would say here, maybe think about king f7. King f7 is a solid option. It may seem a little bit weird, but it's kind of hard for white to attack that king, right? Instead, we have knight f8, which is fine. I would say here against c4, look, I am huge in the Hippo of a position like this, activating my bishop, right? I would look at capturing this pawn, and maybe after, a move like knight takes or something, maybe start looking at h5 and h4, right? H5 and H4 here. What does it give up? Not much, right? Again, our outer pawns have a lot of flexibility and really freedom to kind of just run down the board, right? H5 and H4 there. What does it give up? Well, I guess if you play H5, it weakens G5, but that's fine because the queen defends it, right? Instead here, we have the move of not taking and then playing here, which threatens to trap the bishop, and it doesn't really hurt us that much at all. Instead, we have the move G4, and this is a positional mistake because what does it give up? The square of H4, right? Knight H4 is played. We play G5, another mistake, right? Black there really needs to think about, again, this move of King F7, just holding on, because G5, Knight G6 is played. So, I mean, we push our pawns, but really we kind of just activated their minor piece. And then at this point, yeah, we have knight takes, and after rook takes, the queen's able to come in, right? So we've kind of just overextended our position in the wrong way. I would say, again, instead of all this, keep your pawn on G6 solid and push your H pawn in that kind of situation. But now our position's crumbling a little bit. White is now up a pawn, but as I said, David here plays some great endgame chess. He takes, plays H5, captures off here, rook D7, doubling up on the pawn on D4, F4 is played. We take off, C5, and at this point, I think King F2 is probably the best move for White here, just trying to activate their king, get it a little bit closer. King G2 is also an option. You just got to get this king involved because at the end of the day, we have so much pressure here, right? And I mean, if you play a move like Bishop E3, I guess you're helping out a little bit, but we're just going to take this thing off, right? And White's center is crumbling a little bit. And going back, the move D5 here kind of just hands the pawn to Black directly, right? We win the pawn, we get our king activated, we throw in a check, and here David starts to advance his queenside pawns. This is great here. Put the pawns on light squares, right? So that this bishop, I mean, the bishop's still on the board, but it kind of doesn't exist if we put pawns on the opposite color. King F4 is played. We trade off here. Now we're up a pawn. We snatch off the pawn there. C3. White here kind of has to sack at some point. And, okay, I mean, here David just runs in for the kill of that pawn. B4, B3. White resigns the game because H8 is covered, and this king simply cannot get back, right? So again, I think I think the biggest thing that I would change in that game is here, right? White has a great setup, aiming towards E5, right? Aiming towards G6. Ton of support there, a replacement on F3. I would look to play, instead of Knight G6, I would look to play Knight F6, looking to trap that bishop as my main go-to option there, right? Again, if something like E5, we trap the bishop. If something like D5, we lock it up, which is exactly what we want, right? But overall, great game by David, and really everyone that sent in their games, a big shout out to you guys. And again, sorry I couldn't get to everybody, but all that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed Hippo Week. And again, I made around a 6-hour course on the Hippo, and I highly recommend that you guys go check it out. On top of that, Patreon supporters get, anywhere from a 5% to 20% discount off all courses, depending on what tier they're at. So if you haven't checked out the Patreon to this point, make sure to go check it out. I'm continually trying to add more and more benefits on there, and discounts on courses is one of those. All that being said, appreciate y'all, and I'll see you in the next kind of season of this channel. Hey guys, wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of February in 2023. Appreciate you guys a ton. And if you haven't checked out the Patreon before, make sure to go check it out. There's a lot of Patreon exclusive benefits that you can gain, and I'd love to have you join the crew.